you?
Hello.
Yes, I'm good.
Fine, how are
Enjoying the
you?
sunshine. It's like medicine, isn't it?
I know, it's just like, oh, I
Oh,
feel like we've had the longest
a-
winter and it feels like we're coming out from
yes,
hibernation or something when the sun
perpetual autumn. It's
comes
like
out.
drizzle and oh, yeah, I know what you mean.
Well, so
Oh,
Frankie,
pleasure.
thanks so much for joining tonight. I just want to say hello to everyone who's joined tonight. Thanks very much for coming along. We're just as the conference that many of us were talking about for a few
Yes.
weeks, more than a few weeks before last week, is over and it's done, and we've been planning it and thinking about it for feels like an absolute age, or certainly
Yes.
those of us that were very involved in it. And I think I can maybe hopefully say that a lot of people are feeling pretty much on a high this week after experiencing it. So we just wanted to try and catch up with a few different
Yeah.
people and get their takeouts really, and see if others that maybe feel the same that were coming along, that did come along, or if people didn't, then they maybe get a bit of an idea on what it was like for those of us that were there. So thanks everyone for joining. That's kind of the idea of these little Instagrams that
Yes.
we're doing, these little lives. Um, so yeah, before we move any further though, Frankie, do you want to just introduce yourself and what you do and maybe why you decided to come along
Yeah,
to our PhD
absolutely.
conference this
So,
year?
I'm Francesca. Most people call me Frankie. And I'm a nutritional consultant here in the UK. And Um, I'm just passionate about well everything that the conference was talking about. Food first, well, food and lifestyle first. Teaching people the power of a low carb approach and what you can do before you even think about approaching mainstream medicine, which still seems
Yeah.
unfortunately very kind of controversial. And yeah, it the conference was so lovely and such a wonderful opportunity just to maybe not feel like the weirdo in the room. um, to be around,
Oh,
yeah, to be around
we're part of a
like-minded
crew.
people and people that I've admired for so long. um, just was incredible. And to actually talk, I'm still pinching myself just sitting down to a steak with Georgia Ede. Like, this is totally normal. So yeah, it was amazing time.
Excellent. Oh. Well, so I've got a few different questions to ask you, but I guess the first one is, it was your
Yes.
first PhD conference anyway, which I think is always a bit different to many other kind of normal conferences. But what was your first impression versus what you expected beforehand? Like, what would you say maybe the main differences, or was it totally
Um,
in line with your
yeah, a
expectations?
lot of it was. I was busy looking on the amazing sort of app that we had access to, sort of in advance of the whole thing, just getting a feel for it. And yeah,
Planning your strategy for what you
yeah.
just look forward
I'm a
to.
sucker for a
Someone.
competition. I really am. But no, I genuinely, I had so many questions when speakers were up there, and yeah, even prior to the event. So I was already like badgering away, getting my points up, just asking all these annoying questions. But yeah, it was very similar to what I expected. I suppose I had a feel for many of the speakers anyway, having watched them so frequently through my teenage years and studies and
Yeah.
everything. And yeah, I
Yeah.
suppose just going to Sheffield, that was completely new for me. I'm a country bumpkin and travelled like 5.5 hours, but even that was amazing fun. Took obviously Rachel along with me, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And what do you think of
yeah,
that venue?
brilliant, really
Think it
good.
worked
And we
well?
found an amazing little garden, like indoor garden thing, not far from the venue. So we did a little stroll, stretched our legs. But I liked Sam's interludes with the like get everyone moving, stretching and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. He does that in
Does
he does
it?
that in meetings, and we're all like, "Oh my God, he's making us stand up again." Yeah, he just
It's
can't stop
good. It's
himself.
good.
But um, Okay, so it was kind of in line
Yeah,
with your
definitely.
expectations, so that's good, and hopefully they were high to start with. Um, and then I just wanted to ask you about the different speakers and maybe some of your takeout. So on day one, we had, a lot of content that we covered. We started off
Yeah,
with Ben Bickman, who talked about insulin resistance. We then moved on to diabetes, and talked about, insulin resistance within that context as well. We had David Unwin and Roy Taylor, and then we had a great panel discussion. And then in the afternoon, we moved on to cancer and Alzheimer's. So I just wondered, like, from your perspective as someone who's in the nutrition space, how valuable did you find those talks? Did you know a lot of it already, and it was just kind of maybe confirmation of what you knew, or did you learn anything new? And what were any kind of standout points that you
I am
might have taken away
always,
from
you
those?
started on a real high because Ben Bickman, he is just the most amazing professor and researcher of metabolism that I have ever come across. And just the way that he is able to make the most sciencey stuff sound just life, just like real life and accessible, and
Yeah.
everyone can relate. And he simplifies insulin resistance just so well. I remember I watched him on a video with Dr. Ken Berry not long before, was he seeing him at the conference, and he was saying, this
Mm-hmm.
really should be so simple. We are a nation that has only decreased meat consumption. I think we're at we eat the least red meat now than ever before in 2023. And yet what is happening
Yeah.
to, the rate of metabolic diseases? They're just going up. So this whole kind of
Yeah.
low fat, high carb approach that is pushed upon us so frequently, it just doesn't work
Yeah.
at the most basic level. And I love that. It's just, he really does have the way of just doing these mic drop moments, which, yeah, they're just, you just sit there and think, oh, yeah, why didn't I just say it like that? I would have converted so many more people. um,
And you did have like to have his
yeah,
little
yeah,
alliterative
and the
moments as
and
well
the
when he was
kind of
speaking.
visuals, well, from all of the speakers actually, I thought all of their slides were fantastic, um, and it gave
Mm.
just a real visual, helpful kind of walkthrough of what they were doing and how it all makes
Yeah.
sense. And really, I think for
Mm.
anybody, I don't think anybody could leave that conference not wanting to at least try a food and lifestyle approach
Mm.
first. If this
Mm.
doesn't convince you, being
Yeah.
here at this conference, if it didn't convince you, nothing else will. So, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Ben especially has just a way, say, of bringing to life a very complicated, what would seem like something beyond the average person's grasp in terms of understanding their own physiology and what's important, but yet he makes it so accessible. And that's just such a skill and such a talent. I think he's like probably the biggest thing that I think he can bring to the conversation is just the simplicity of his message. And his slides were really
absolutely.
awesome and
Yeah,
brought to
they really
life what he
did.
was saying so beautifully. And that my 14-year-old daughter was there, and she was in such awe of how he explained it, and she
Yeah,
said, I wish I
yeah.
got taught science like that. So I think she's trying to figure out how to make him her
Yes,
professor
I
one
don't
day.
blame
But
her. I think that is one thing. If I could say anything, um, I know I've been talking to you a lot about this anyway, but I would love there to be more, and maybe next year there could be someone that hones in. I will on the children, and if only it could
yeah,
start there. If we had people like Ben Bickman and Georgia Eid and these amazing speakers
yeah,
in the classrooms with the kids from the word go. I know
yeah,
they're hard to come by,
yeah,
these amazing minds, but if we could,
yeah.
then it would just it would just be incredible. I think what could be achieved. And
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
it would, because you're starting at the beginning, right, and you're instilling the right habits to start with. And I know we've talked about it and how important it is to get it right. The more generations there are before us that have had to, endure the wrong
Mm.
information, I think it's just, we're kind of right at that turning point now where we can change it for the next generation, and we can't afford for them to get to the point of
Mm.
going in the same direction as everyone else before they realize the difference, especially when you're talking about addictions and how much these habits can
Yeah.
influence your whole life and your health. So yeah, we do need to talk about that more, because it is such a
Yes.
growing area, I think,
Yeah.
that's
And
so
the
important.
targeting is just so incredible, isn't it? How everything is just, they're conditioned from the word go, and all the advertising is just, brightly coloured, all these false statements, and
Yeah,
yeah, they really do have a hard time kind of trying to navigate this world
yeah.
without all these temptations and peer pressures and things. So
Mm.
yeah, yeah.
That's right. We do actually have a project in the PHC called Collaboration for Kids, and we didn't talk about it too much at the conference, but it is looking at all of the touch points in society that kids come through, and institutions and schools and hospitals, and trying to think about how we can send a different message, rather than all of this is in for you to eat in abundance, which shouldn't be how they are programmed to think about these types of foods, but very much does come through even in social media and all of the platforms that they're going to be
Yes,
spending a lot of time on. So hopefully that will be something that we'll see more of in our future conferences, because it is something we're
yes,
really working
yeah,
quite actively on as
wonderful.
well.
um
Um, so so yeah, any
um
other take-ups from
yes,
day one
so I
of
actually I wrote a
diabetes and
few bits
cancer and
down. So the next um
oh
bit
good.
that really impacted me was the talk by, I've written her name down, because actually this was a lady that I hadn't come across before, and um, she was just incredible. But she was doing the talk on cancer, so that's it.
Sophie
And I
Evans.
just,
Yeah.
some of the information that she was putting forward about using a ketogenic diet for cancer just blew my mind. The information, the
Mm.
stats that she has on, prolonged recovery with cancer patients, and putting cancer in remission. I think it was 8.5 years. She was talking about many of her success stories, and I was just in awe of everything she's doing, but also just like, why are we not grasping hold of this, like shouting it from the rooftops? These patients having
Yeah.
the most amazing success with something that is terrifying. People are
Yeah.
terrified the moment they hear the C word, and it's
Yeah.
it is, obviously the dietary prevention is there. We can access that so easily. So yeah,
Yeah.
that really impacted me, and I'll certainly be following her work from here on out. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and there are some amazing scientists, but they're just not getting as much airtime and as much kind of funding for their research to show the results that they're getting using diet to not necessarily. I mean, we don't necessarily know whether it will prevent cancer, but it certainly can make treatment a lot better. And there's more and more trials that are starting to spring up, but again, not as many as there should be, considering just how much potential and opportunity
Mm.
there is if we were to explore them. So yeah, I'm glad that was starting to come through, as because it's
Yeah,
really
I'm
important that we raise
often
the profile of that.
sharing Thomas Seyfried's work, and he did an amazing episode with Dr. Chafee. And
Yeah, yeah,
I've often sort of plucked that out and given it to people as just a confirmation that this does work. Because that's something else.
yeah.
I think so many people are so struck by fear that they won't even think about using diet and lifestyle when the word cancer
Mm,
pops up. Um, so yeah,
yeah,
I think more people talking about it can really try and dissolve some of that fear, I think. Um,
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, even to just hear Andrew's story, which was always very, we knew was going to be very personal and from the heart, and he went through, um, such a time of it and trying to figure out what direction he should go in and how to give himself a
Yes.
fighting chance after being told that he had none. But yeah, he was there talking to us all,
Yeah.
and 10, 11 years on, and giving us his story. So there is that he shouldn't have to be the exception. He can be what's common, and I think that we just have to keep raising this more and more until it starts to and still I think it's important that people hear it, that the public hear it, that the grassroots start to kind of take hold of it, because I think until people start asking their own doctors, well, what about this thing that I've heard? I think sometimes it's hard to change the system when there's so many people who are just comfortable and used to what
Mm.
they've always known and what they think is right. So yeah, just getting this message out, we're going to hopefully start a chain of events for people to start just being aware and start to challenge and question some
Yeah,
of the status quo that
definitely.
needs to be
And
done.
I think the last thing that really sort of struck me on day one was Georgia Eads' message. She put an amazing slide up which just said hope, and she's so positive, and that was just amazing. And I think all of us just felt really lifted by that, because it was such a lovely message, and compounded with all her amazing knowledge. She was telling us about the brain having an immune system and how we just need to treat it in exactly the same way, although it's very hard to kind of get in and look at the brain, because you can't measure it the same way. You can't sort of hone in on the brain,
Yeah,
but you can
yeah,
measure it in the same way as you do when your immune system is weakening, and it does react to these constant
hmm
elevations in blood glucose. That's what causes this chronic inflammation and
yeah.
oxidative. Sorry, that's not coming out right, is it? Yeah. So
I know what you mean.
yeah, that I thought that was brilliant, and just such a hopeful message. Yeah, I really like the way she put that forward.
Yeah, she was fantastic. And did you have any thoughts on Patrick's
Yes,
presentation on
obviously
Alzheimer's?
I haven't honed in on that area quite so much, but I thought it was really good. And yeah, again, he had a great way of kind of making things easy and accessible and understandable for everyone in the audience. So yeah, yeah, very good.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, that was day one. So moving on to day two is a very different kind of format. We did have a couple of more, I suppose, traditional kind of approach to the start of the morning. We did actually have Georgie on the second day that I know you mentioned already, and then we had a food addiction panel,
That was
and
brilliant.
that was really exciting. So I think it was run really well by the lovely Heidi. But we had some great people on there that were coming at it from very different kind of angles. We had Jen Unwin, Dr. Georgia Eid again, Dr. Ali Ibrahim, who's part of this scientific advisory committee and is a child psychiatrist, and Claire Snowden Darling on hormones. So yeah, did you find any key takeouts from
Yeah,
that, or
I
any thoughts
loved
you
it,
want to
and I
share?
think that is it. We need to talk more on, making this a sustainable thing. I think that is the roadblock, isn't it, that we're all up against, that this food addiction kind of thing, that it just is there when people first embark on any nutritional changes. You are going to That is your first roadblock. So
Yeah,
I think there's so many different puzzle pieces to this when you try and get over that hurdle, and they all had a different kind of
yeah,
bit to talk on, which was lovely. But yeah, I think for ladies, we just have this extra layer of complication, which I'm really passionate about, sort of teaching men and women how to do this low carb strategy differently, because we have,
Mm-hmm.
you know, with
Yeah.
women having so many more hormones to navigate it, we often have this whole
Yeah.
guilt, we have this relationship with food that is based on guilt a lot of the time. And I see that in, you
Yeah.
know, when I work with people a lot, that they're just in this kind of binge and restrict cycle, and the relationship with food has completely broken down. But actually, when you get women
Mm.
to start looking at their cycle and tracking their cycle, and even post menopause, doing this kind of ketogenic or even carnivore approach in a cyclical fashion, can really help
Yeah.
remove some of that, and understanding the kind of ebb and flow of hormones and how estrogen and progesterone work in completely opposite ways to each other. I think that
Yeah.
is so freeing.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about that enough, because I think some of us women, we get to this week before ovulation or the week before bleed week, where we are prone to have more cravings and less energy, and, you
Yeah.
know, not be up for that kind of hit session 5 times a week, you know. And if you are doing that, you know, back off a little bit. But we we
Mm.
feel like we have to do that, I think. And actually, there are times when
Yeah.
we really shouldn't. It can work against us. And also, when I
Yeah.
see kind of husband and wife or family situations where people are trying to do this together, you really need all of these bits of information, because there can be like this resentment as well between husband and wife or partners, because men seem to sort of go into the keto style way of eating or embark on a carnivore diet, and their results are like just absolutely accelerated compared to the poor lady of the partnership, who just needs to do things just slightly differently. And just these little tweaks can be
Yeah.
so impactful. So there was moments of that discussion, the
Yeah.
panel, where I was like, I just want to throw something in. But it
Oh.
was fantastic. It was really, really good to hear some of these important discussions
Yeah.
happen. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think Dr. Ali Ibrahim said something quite powerful at the end about, I think the question was, if he was put in charge, how would he change things? And he said something about not calling processed foods
Yes.
anymore. Let's just call
Yeah.
them drugs,
Amazing.
which is what they are. Um, and you know, it sounds like a little bit out there and crazy, but it's, you know, unfortunately, you know, so the levels of chronic
Yeah.
illness, they're pretty up there at the moment. So I think it's a reckoning that a lot of people maybe will, it will help to start helping people
Yes. Oh,
understand that
time and
a
time
bit better.
again, sugar is compared to a class A drug, and it's just absolutely true. Um, it affects us in all the same ways, and the addiction is real.
Yeah.
You know, I remember watching a documentary years
Yeah.
ago about, you know, I think it was something farm, like they put a load of celebrities and high profile people on a show where they just took sugar away from their diets, and they were absolutely having withdrawal symptoms and what looked like the effects of drug removal. And it, you know, so it does present in
Yeah.
exactly the same way. So yeah.
It does. It does. So I'm glad we covered that really well. And obviously Jen Unwin, Dr. Jen Unwin in our charity is leading on food addiction for us and for many. And on the Sunday, you wouldn't have come along to it, but we did have a little fringe event that was just for local patients in Sheffield, and it was interesting to see some of the reactions to food being talked about,
Wow.
something you can be addicted to, because it doesn't seem like it would be. It's something we have to have. It's not like nicotine or alcohol. We don't have to have it. Food we have to have. So people think, well, you can't be addicted to it because it's, you know, it's an essential part of life. But she really does help people understand that, you know, it really depends on the type of food, and how it's made, as to, you know, where your perceptions may have gone wrong about that the possibility of food addiction can exist. And it was a really powerful workshop that she did, and I know that she talked about the courses she'll be setting up online. They're really going to be pulling out a lot of those types of insights into that, so people can really, and once you do her little kind of diagnostic tool that she has, you kind of realize, well, that absolutely makes sense, that I must have some kind of food addiction. So it really helps people have the power to do something about it once they realize and call it what it is. So there'll be lots more to come from that space as well. And then, so that was the morning, and then the afternoon where it got more interesting, you could argue, for some. So we started off the afternoon talking about, can you outrun a bad diet? So we had a few different kind of sports background guests that came along: James Cracknell, Christian Daly, Dr. Sean Baker, and Victoria Jeffs. What did you think of that one?
I thought it was amazing, really, really good. And I put up a little highlight already, actually, from that panel, because I just thought it was so impactful the way James spoke of the Olympic food hall, and it just really shows the length that food, big food, will go to destroy lives, really, but keep people addicted, and they will prey on the most dedicated. We've got these two ends of the scale. We've got children who are just innocent, they don't know, they're just learning, they're like a sponge, everything's kind of fresh and going in, and so they're targeting that group. And then we've got these amazing athletes who are the most dedicated, they've given up everything for their sport, and yet they still face these massive food challenges. So they have to kind of think, I need to make sure that, he was describing not taking a certain route in the Olympic Village, which had an ice cream vendor at every station along the way, and he would take a little, another little route so that he could avoid those buckets of ice creams. And it's just, you just think, so these massive food companies are sponsoring the Olympics, and and they get given this card, just say, eat as much as you want of these foods that we're going to present to you. So you have to show this almost superhero strength to not only be doing the best time in your sport, being absolutely exhausted, but then be faced with a load of junk food when you're starving hungry at the end of your race. So they just have to think, no, my race time, I have to, and why should they have to do that? It should be, I can reward myself now with good food, food that won't affect my race time the next day, or, my performance at all. So it's just completely backwards, isn't it? I
mean, he was literally tripping up, and as we were all metaphorically tripping up with these foods, but he was literally tripping up over them, trying to find his way home, wasn't he, with these those ice creams that he'd discussed. So that was a great panel. I think it was just good to hear of athletes that are able to perform well, fueling themselves without sugar and without carbs, and that's what I think is an important message for people to take away, because again, the perception is almost in the opposite direction about any kind of sporting situation. You need to have carbohydrates. It's everywhere. It's in my daughter's school, where she gets messages saying, bring along snacks all day long for Saturday because we're going to be playing all day. Well, no, you don't need to have something going in your mouth all the whole time either. So there is a lot of change there that still needs to happen as well, and hopefully this again is changing that
and I think James was also saying about it's me, I'm not on first name terms with James Cracknell.
James.
But he was talking about some of his best times being fasted, and I don't mean to sort of not speak about Sean Baker and the other panelists as much, but they're equally impressive. I'm always in awe of the sheer size of Dr. Baker alongside everyone else. Like, of course you can fuel yourself on just meat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it just sometimes just takes his presence, doesn't it? His enormous muscles just
Yeah.
to be like,
Yeah.
don't counteract me. Yeah.
So yeah, that was a good panel. Then we had lunch, and then yeah, then it was the one which was included a couple of people zooming in. It was
Yes.
our Do We Need to Eat Plants discussion, the long-awaited one, which many people were interested in hearing and seeing. And yeah, so we had Dr. Sean Baker on that panel as well, with Dr. Anthony Chafee coming in from Australia, and also Patrick Holford, Dr. Chiddy, our plant-based doctor, and Hayley Wood, Dr. Hayley Wood. So yeah, tell me what you thought about
It
that
was
one.
very, very interesting. I do feel the meat eaters wiped the floor with the plant eaters slightly.
Not that you're
Not
biased
biased
or
at all.
anything there.
No. But it was
That's
I thought the conversation was going to be very emotive, wasn't it? We all have strong emotions about these subjects. And there was amazing offerings from both sides, particularly sorry, I'm terrible with names. The lady that was speaking, who had she'd adopted her wonderful daughter, who think was sat in the front row. And I think it's
yeah,
important for us to remember that if you're eating whole foods and it's working for you, and you are having these amazing, long-lasting results, you know, if it's working for you at that moment and everything, you're happy, you're stress free, maybe you've removed your environmental toxins and you're eating whole foods, then great. We have to start
yeah,
celebrating each other a little
yeah,
bit more, I think, regardless of whether
yeah,
we're more plant heavy or meat heavy. I do still, I
yeah,
really genuinely believe, I think 17 years is the longest I think that anyone has maintained a vegan diet and kept all
mm,
markers, healthy, within a healthy range.
yeah, yeah,
So I'm never going to be somebody that promotes a vegan diet. But I think it's important for us to listen, and I think that we just really need to respect each other, and the panel were really good at doing that, and that's why I think it was so impactful, because everyone was very respectful. I know that some
mm,
of us were definitely biting our lips slightly when Dr. Chiddy was talking, and there was some references made to things which we were just like, no, we know the answer to that one. And particularly talking about saturated fat, I think the fear mongering can be really, really powerful when it comes to saturated fat, and that's what's done so much damage
mm,
over all of these years. So I think when any of us hear that correlation, or that
yeah,
trying to be talked about openly, I think it's sometimes a bit painful.
yeah,
And Dr. Ben Bickman, he does a great he has a great way again of speaking about saturated fat and why this should have been debunked ages
mm,
ago, because there's just simply not
yeah,
enough information, and there's not been enough studies on saturated fat in the presence of a low carb diet. It just completely changes the whole ball game when you remove the carbs. So yeah,
yeah,
I know we all have strong feelings, but it was definitely a brilliant thing to listen to. And Sean Baker at the beginning, when he
mm,
said, everyone in the audience, stand up or hold your hand up if you've increased your red meat
yeah.
consumption, and hands up if you feel that's improved your health. And yeah, when he was just like, well, there you go, there's a fact. It's just like, yeah, that's brilliant. Brilliant.
That was a great opening. That was. But I'm glad you said that, because I think, what was really important for us is that, we knew it was emotive. We knew that it was something people will have very strong opinions on, but there were two key things we wanted to make sure people understood, which was that the main thing is, as you said as well, Frankie, if we are able to avoid the processed foods and just eat real foods, whatever those real foods are, you're still going to
Than
be,
the rest of the
80% better
world.
off
Yeah,
than
yeah.
most people out there. Yes. So let's just start there and be happy about that. But then for those people who do want to have to, who do face a crossroads after that because they do want to be healthy and they genuinely don't know, they don't instinctively know which way to go, it's very difficult for people to know how to make sense of such contrasting information about whether or not plants are good or bad, whether or not meat's good or bad. And so what we were really just aiming to do was to provide that information in a as similar or reconciled a kind of format as possible so that people can actually compare the ideas and see what sits best with them in terms of what makes sense to them and help them make an informed decision about optimizing further beyond taking
Yes.
out processed food. So that was
I
our
think
objective with it, and I think there were some really good arguments that were put forward on both sides, and I think people will at least have that
Yeah,
information to kind of go
absolutely.
away with.
There was one question that I asked, actually, I put it on the live Q&A, and because there was one question I
Yeah.
just wanted a genuine answer to from the plant sort of based side. And that is, we spent the whole conference learning about the importance of low carb and why that is the way to go. That is what essentially the cure for all of these metabolic diseases and mental health concerns that we're learning about. And yet trying to do a low carb ketogenic, sort of certainly a ketogenic diet, trying to do a keto based diet with no meat is incredibly hard. So I would, I wanted to hear from any of them really on how they would suggest going about that in a healthy way, because I just don't know how you would plug all those holes. So we cannot negate at this point the importance of being low carb, but how do you do that safely if you're going to remove the meat from the situation? So yeah.
No, it's a good question, and there were many on the live Q&A, which we are actually trying to get some answers to, some of the common ones. So we'll try and get that updated on the app, because the app is still working. So if anyone wants to kind of still log on and have a look, they're really welcome to, and even the live stream is still up there.
Wonderful.
So yes, so that was the plants panel, and then the last panel of the day was about cows themselves and whether or not they're impacting the environment. And obviously that's coming away from nutrition a little bit, but very important and connected topic that allows us to have the choice to eat as we would like to.
That was brilliant, and it was it was so down to earth, and I loved is it Angus who was speaking. He did this kind of, again, just this really impactful phrase at the end where he said, we should be thinking of this from a perspective of I can't remember, it was like a 3-line thing where he was like, if it's alive you can eat it, or it was just such a good sentence, and I was like, I have to use that.
It was. Wait, give it to me. If it ate plants, eat it. If it is a plant, you can eat it.
That's it. Yeah. Well done. You've got it.
Don't eat it.
Your recall's far better than mine.
That was a great end to the whole thing. So yeah, so it was 2 days, I think, of very full on information and lots to take in, and but aside from all of the the actual content that was shared, I think people also really felt a benefit in being there and seeing each other and getting to know people that we've only ever talked to or heard of online. Was there anyone that you were particularly excited to have met? That's my next question for you.
I was so excited to meet Anthony Chafee, because we've had a lot of communication, but that was just unfortunate, and I'm sure he'll come next year, hopefully. And again, I really wanted to meet Ben Bickman, but we just literally skimmed past each other because I was so I didn't get to sort of meet him face to face, but I obviously just happy enough to be there in the audience. And it was really funny, actually. I got to know his brother more than more than him, because we had the like little war over who was going to win the competition. It was it was very entertaining. So thank you.
So when you said everything was in line with your expectations, were you expecting to be in war with Ben Bickman's brother?
No, I wasn't. That was a highlight. That was an additional bonus. But yeah, so thank you, Jonathan, if you're watching. That was good fun. But no, I was really pleased, actually,
so just on
that you kind of had that last panel discussion as well. I didn't say enough about just how important I think it is that we move past this whole cows are ruining the planet discussion, and really look at how the kind of vegan movement really is destroying farmers, you know, and how much they're able to do for us. I so often in my consultations talk about how we need to support our local farmers, and certainly the ones that are trying to do things properly. There are so many that, you know, they're doing things organically, but they can't afford to get the organic stamp. And it's, you know, that's such a rigorous process. It's 7 years worth of soil turnover, and a really hugely expensive process for somebody to get that certification. But a lot of farms are doing it right. So I'm always saying it's so good to just be able to get a relationship with your local butcher and your local farmer and ask all those questions. And so, I thought that was a really good panel discussion, and having a farmer who's doing it, you know, he's living that life, and to tell us all about it was really good. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, it was fantastic the whole couple of days. I don't think any of it's quite sunk in yet. I think I'm still kind of just feeling a little bit like I'm floating, and I think as we start to see some of the talks come out, I think it will start to sink in a little bit more, some of the messages that were just so great at the time.
Yeah, and you've all worked so incredibly hard. I have to thank you all for what you were able to put forward for everyone, and it was just amazing.
That's very nice of you. We do it, and we really just, you know, we appreciate the support that people have given us, and it did feel like this conference was very different to the previous ones. There were so many more members of the public there, and so many people were very passionate about, you know, the kind of the opportunity and the discussions, and there was just a buzz about it that I think is very different to any normal charities conference where you would go along to, and they would be, you know, they would have a big sponsor, and they would have you know, other messages that they would have to make sure that they put out there. We have the freedom to just talk about what we believe to be the truth about nutrition, and so I think that really energizes people who feel like they're part of the movement. So thank you for the support of the grassroots community and of everyone that's involved in coming along, because that's the only way we can make any difference, really. So so the final thing I wanted to ask you, Frankie, was, as the honorary winner of the most engaged attendee of the whole conference, and for anyone who's not aware, we had a little game in our conference app, and you had to accumulate points by just doing lots of things in the app and networking and all kinds of things. And yeah, everyone tonight is speaking and seeing and hearing from the winner of that competition, Frankie. So the questions are you going to give any tips, or are you going to keep all your secrets for next year and try and make this I
totally am. I think actually your husband's worked out a few tricks or two, so
well, I mean, yeah, and also I guess maybe Jonathan Bickman won't be back next year. You'll have even you know, more of a clear run. So, but yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I don't actually. I think I've got one particular secret that I'm not going to share, that might see me as top of the leaderboard most years. So I won't tell you, because you might be able to restrict me slightly. But okay. I have my prize here. my little bundle of
Your
books.
books.
Yeah.
Show us your
So
books. Oh,
yeah,
on
and
Katie Curl
then
Day
I
soon.
got that one and that
Oh
little one
yeah,
there. So I'm obviously strictly
excellent.
carnivore, but these will be very useful for some of my clients, I'm sure. Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be benefit somewhere. So, well, thank you so much for joining, and thanks everyone for joining tonight. And it's just been great to just, chew
Yeah.
the fat with you, so to speak, um, and just relive it a little bit. So, thanks again for coming, for your support, and for everyone online for their support. And we'll probably be doing a few more conversations like this. So try and join in and keep an eye out for more notifications of them, which should be coming soon. So thank you again,
Oh, and
and have a great
you,
evening,
thank you so
Frankie.
much for chatting. It's been fun. Take care.
Yeah, all right. Speak to you
Bye.
soon. Bye.